Welcome to the Progress Portland podcast. I'm Kip Silverman.
I'm
and you
Aquafina.
are Aquafina. And today's guest is back on the pod. Really excited. Previously, it was candidate Mitch Green, and now it's Councilor Mitch Green from District 4. And welcome back, Mitch.
Thanks for having me back, Kip. I've really enjoyed your pod and really looking forward to talking to you guys. A lot has happened since I was candidate Green.
Yeah, I think that's really where I was hoping to kind of start. Like, you're a year in, and a little over a year in, and so much has transpired. Where do you even start? The new regime nationally, the getting acclimated to, like, how does this all work from the inside, and the constant complaints that we need to go back to the old system because democracy is hard. I'm like, fucking, what is wrong with you people? You don't know how anything works. And I would say, like, all the revelations from the end of last year, beginning of this year of, hey, there's actually money everywhere, even though we're going into an austerity mode for the 30th year in a row. So where do you want to start? How's it been?
I say this to folks all the time that this is the most challenging job I've ever had, and I have been a roofer. I've worked in call centers. I've been a line cook. I've been a soldier in combat, and this is the most difficult job I've ever had. But I've never loved a job more than this, and not really sure what that says about me, but I am gifted in having the presence of many colleagues here in this building who are both brilliant, but also some of the strongest fighters I've ever met in my life. And just truly, I feel like I have been inaugurated with a crew of people who are going to make history in this city, because, like, for the first time, I think we're sort of laying down the gauntlet and saying, I'm not rubber stamping your proposals. I'm not accepting business as usual. And we're going to look under the hood, even if it's really hard, even if a lot of people are really nervous about it. So I think that's what I was put in this office to do. Other thing that I think folks don't talk about a lot is it's not really me, it's my staff, it's my team, and it's the sort of, like, behind the scenes work that makes any of the stuff that you see on the surface possible. And everything I said about my colleagues, I would say about them. For whatever reason, I've been blessed by having folks sort of find me and say, I'm ready for work. And we've built a team that is brilliant and keeps me honest.
I love accidentally running into your staff and wind up talking for 30, 40 minutes in the street about all kinds of crazy stuff. And I appreciate you calling that out. Where do you even start with some of that? The comment that was made to me back in the day when I briefly worked in City Hall was that the commissioners had the easiest fucking job in the world, right? They had a massive staff, 2 to 3 times the size of what you guys have, and they just kind of had to show up and make commandments, and then people would chase them down and make things happen, right? But in this new paradigm, with all the different focused meeting groups that you guys had, and the new versions of that I'm not sure I love yet or will love, the deep levels of conversations that you guys are having out in the open and transparently has created friction and accountability. And accountability creates friction when people don't want to be accountable. Love to get your take on, is it as expected? Is it far worse? How far do we need to go to get through all the layers of what used to be very vertical groups of bureaus and departments to more flattened, but now more layers of management in there that still tend to, I would argue, obfuscate and make things still hard to figure out?
Great question. There's one part of me that's like, these are the specific issues I care about: social housing, police accountability, active transportation infrastructure, good kind of like left YIMBY things, the environment. And then there's another side of me that just really cares about, like, good governance stuff. And that latter piece is necessary to make the other stuff happen. And so a lot of what we have had to do in this, like in this office, and when I say we, I'm talking about me and my staff, and also the co-sponsors on the initiatives that I've led on, is is right from the jump, right after inauguration, basically jump right into oversight mode. The two things that we sunk our teeth into right away, probably in the first weeks of being like, okay, they're onboarding me, were matters related to the Zenith Energy Terminal
Mhm.
and matters related to some complaints I was hearing from a tenants union in Old Town. And just sort of getting those questions answered and raising matters of concern, you realize that even though, like, I'm one of the most powerful people in one of the largest cities in America because I'm an elected official on a board, I still don't. I still have a long ways to go to pierce through layers and layers of obfuscation and roadblocks. I do think it's good that we got rid of the commissioner form of government where you have this direct line of command from a commissioner on down, because I certainly don't want to be in the position where every time I have a new idea and the inclination to give a directive, then a good chunk of the city's resources are mobilized to that end. It may not be a good idea, and it may not be representative of what the public wants, to the extent that I'm elected official, fine, it is. And then if it's not, they throw me out of office. But the new form of government was set up to sort of say, all right, we pass laws, we pass policies that have clear legislative intent. The city administrator executes, and then we follow up with oversight to make sure it happens. It's that
Mhm.
oversight piece that is truly, I would argue, probably the most important thing we have to do right now on city council. And I say it, I really do think it's the most important, because I think unless we're able to establish the norms and the
Mhm.
expectations that when city councilors have questions, however formal those questions are, that those questions are
Mhm.
answered with timeliness and honesty. And it's been a challenge. I think the first resolution I filed of substance was a Zenith Energy oversight resolution, and we had like a first of its kind hearing in this city. I'm not
Mhm.
aware of a single instance in my adult life where the city of Portland has ever had anything close to an oversight hearing from the council's end. It may have happened in some older vintage of the city's history that I'm not aware of, but certainly not in the modern sense. And then most recently, we worked with some counselors to bring forward a housing, what's the $21 million of Portland Housing Bureau money, but it's not about the the accounting systems. No, it's very much like, why did you not talk to us about this money
Mhm.
ahead of a budget process? And so it was Herculean to even get to the point of even having that hearing, or passing that resolution. A lot of people don't want to do this kind of work. A lot of my colleagues don't want to do this work. And if you watch the City Club, I think the most recent one with former City Administrator Mike Jordan, he talks about this feeling of staff being afraid or scared when they see drama at the dais. But I think that misses the mark. I think right now there's a culture of fear inside of the city because you have deputy city administrators who have established this idea that if you raise an issue that makes us look bad, then council's going to get mad, and that's your fault. And so let's not tell anyone. Let's manage a PR nightmare. Like, everything's a PR nightmare, rather than say, we want you to talk to council and let's help you be successful in talking to council, and let's get to the oversight much earlier in the process. And so I'm happy to dig into any of the specific policy stuff, but I really, Kip, I think the work that we have to do at the council still, and we've only just begun it, is to really establish that oversight is a normal thing. It's nothing to
Mhm.
be afraid of. It should happen all the time. And if you do establish that, then I think we're going to get way better outcomes down there.
It seems to be
Absolutely.
it's a psychological thing where it's like if somebody's watching you, you must be in trouble. And it's like, no, no, we're watching to make sure it gets executed correctly.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that oversight was definitely one of those things that went to the wayside. And it felt like everything was just status quo. So I know when you were all going through the budget, and then of course with the Portland Housing Bureau debacle that's going on, questions that were being asked from you and others that were not even particularly controversial were making people
Mhm.
fidget. And it was like, no, you're really just trying to figure out, hey, why was this money never put into the budget before? Why was it never mentioned? And how, if how can we spend it if we can spend it and what limitations there are. And it felt like they were losing their mind. And it's like, no, we're just asking
Yeah,
what happened. You're not in trouble. What happened? And they act
yeah,
like they're in trouble. And it's like, do you have a guilty conscience? What's going on here?
I think the deputy city administrators have stepped into a role that has become a replacement for commissioners. And I think that's what Mike Jordan created. That's what Ted Wheeler created. Was this sort of like, before we reform this system, we're going to replace commissioners with these deputy city administrators who wear this burden of a political shield in some sense,
mhm,
but also are a political actor to, I think, much more powerful people on the administrative side of the house. And I don't think that's what the charter envisioned at all.
yeah. No, absolutely not. I'll tell a brief story. I don't wanna take a ton of time, but when I was working in the city, I had reached out to some, program manager type people who I had previously been interviewing with, and now I'm working in the executive office, right? And I asked them, "This one project you're on," I won't go into any details because, it's not relevant, but, I was like, "This one project that you guys are working on, is this data being collected?" And they were like, "Well, no, it's not." And I'm like, "Okay, what would it take to add that into what you're working on so we can make better decisions?" And the response was like, "Well, if you want us to do that, we will do that." I'm like, "That's not what I asked you. What I asked you was, what would it take? Does it make sense to do this? Is this part of the thing?" They're like, "Well, if you'd like us to do that, we will do that." And then all of a sudden, light bulbs went off. I'm like, "Oh, I could ask for bring me cherry pie every single day, and somebody's going to bring me cherry pie every single day." Just like whoever was in a bureau that that commissioner was overseeing was going to do whatever they want because that's how you fight for the budget and keep your job,
Yeah.
right? But the DCAs, and I know a couple, and I think they're wonderful people, but the DCAs, like you said, I feel like that is the same kind of role. They're fighting for their organization and shouldn't be fighting. It should be a flattened organization where undoing 150 years of crappy governance, and it's not going to be simple or easy. um, do you feel like going through the housing part of it, and maybe you already answered this, that there are enough people who are saying, okay, this is going to be tough, and but this is worthwhile going through? Or do you see people like just building new brick walls and new silos that are going to make it harder to make things happen?
It depends on who you're talking to and who you're centering in this. I think every time we push on this thread, I think it does create a new brick wall in a certain sense from people who are much more senior in this organization, and that becomes a new challenge to solve, as well as other counselors. Frankly, I think every time I've tried to push hard on this question, I think it's created this sort of suggestion that I'm on some kind of a witch hunt or I've got it out for some individual, and like couldn't be further from the truth. So that creates barriers that I need to react to you know, and and evolve around. That's the job of
Yeah.
being a counselor. But I also talk to constituents. I talk
Mhm.
to orgs that are in the housing space. I talk to people who used to work in this city and who were driven out of the city and have stories to tell. And they say, "Hey, I'm listening to this meeting, this work session, this council meeting, and the way that you're talking about oversight like brought me to tears because it's something that I know is a problem because I'm not there anymore because I was asking questions about it being a problem."
Yeah.
And you have protected sources through your unions and through folks that you want to protect folks, and so they're not going to come forward with their names, but they say we're on the right track, and the culture of fear is coming from inside the house.
Yeah.
It's not counsel. And so I think whenever you're faced with that tension, I go back to asking, well, why am I here? I am here because I made certain value commitments to the community. And one of those was to fight for progressive politics and open government and accountability. And so I know which way I fall on things when it gets tough. Like my I have great relationships with a lot of these senior folks who think the kind of actions that I want to take make them uncomfortable, but I'm not here to make them feel better. I'm here
Right.
to, they're going to be fine no matter what happens, right? They very high paid officials, maybe too much, but it's the trust in government that scares me right now. It's the fact that like I have folks who, despite me being an open socialist, voted for me, ranked number one, and I think are concerned that they'll never vote yes again on another levy or bond measure or anything like that because they just don't believe that we can do it. They don't believe that we can spend their money, and I'm like, that's deeply worrying because those are the people who always pay for the things they believe in, and if they're
Right.
starting to say no on that, we've got a crisis on our hands.
Mhm.
Right.
Well, so that's something I wanted to ask because, the Portland Housing Bureau has raised a lot of different opinions. And regardless of how it ends up shaking out and whatever recommendations get adopted, um, my question is will you rebuild trust with residents after this? And how do you make sure that whatever way the money's spent, there are visible results?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is just being really honest every step of the way. I wrote that resolution for the housing ordinance very specifically to say it's not just a conversation, it's not just a report to say here's our get well plan. No, I'm gathering public records. I want all of it. And I want to talk about it very publicly. And I want to just sort of expose the areas where this thing broke down and
Hmm.
lay it out on the table. And if that tarnishes the goodwill of the city in the short run, it will be for the better in the long run. I can
Yeah.
guarantee you. And then I think just sort of honesty up front, being like, this is where we have failed, and then offering a commitment for how to fix it. And so, I post very much in real time about what I'm thinking about politically. I put all of my pending council actions on my website.
Hmm.
We're very candid with voters on where we stand. I put sort of unabashed, unvarnished ideas in my newsletter that sometimes ruffle some feathers. So I think like asking the tough questions, revealing what happened, and just saying, look, this is the wound, but the way we close that wound is to lay out my commitments and then take accountability if I fail or if I go a different direction. And I think, for example, just to bring it back to the concrete, I'm one of the co-sponsors of the latest iteration of how to spend this found housing money,
Mhm.
that we will hear in the Housing and Permitting Committee next week.
Right.
A big part of that is grants to, not grants, but a set aside for social housing or acquisition, limited equity, co-op conversion, you name it. But the idea is it's social housing, and it moves us a step in that direction. I don't think that solves the issue, and I don't think that the trick is done by just saying this is what I want to spend the money on. It's following up. It's to make sure that the Portland Housing Bureau is actually appropriating or issuing a notice of funding availability and awarding RFPs in a way that satisfies the legislative intent and value of
Hmm.
that. And then when they don't, you claw the money back, or you sort of bring forward new oversight on it and say, why did you not fulfill the legislative intent? So it's this endless iteration. But I think going out saying we screwed up, here's how we're going to fix it, here's the way we're going to sort of make a better investment, and then taking ownership when it doesn't work out. I think those are the key ingredients always.
Yeah. No. And that's part of. I don't understand some of the disconnect other than it's intentional disinformation is the right word, isn't the right word, but it's misdirection in that, oh, look at this. They've been here for a year and they already have this housing debacle. Well, no, it's because of decades of a way things were working. You guys have come in, you asked the right questions, some information bubbled up, and you started pulling the threads on it. This is how things get better in the technical world. When something goes wrong, you do a root cause analysis. You say, what went wrong? How do we unpack this? How do we figure out um, to resolve it in the short term? And in the long term, how do we make sure it never happens again? And that's
Yeah.
like your blameless post-mortem or your post-mortem, whatever you call it. But when you have so many levels of this and you have so many bureaus that have not had a level of transparency or accountability, you're going to go through this over and over again. And just trying to explain to people this is how you do progress, this is how you get better. And it is sometimes messy and contentious. But I mean, it's a great pivot to the Moda Center stuff, right? And didn't I just read that some guy from Texas just bought the Blazers out of nowhere?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But you're trying to redevelop. I've been in Moda. It's fine, right? I've been to Shea Stadium. It was not fine, but it served for decades. But then all this funding between Blazers need a new arena and they want to put a baseball arena on the inner east side and all this stuff. And where does the money come from? And does it really ever work out for the public? We're learning new things about that whole effort, and I'd love to hear your take on all of that.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump into this. It's extremely timely. So yesterday, someone on Blue Sky who's a basketball fan posted a pic, or maybe it was a screen grab of, that there's an apartment, there's like a loft in the Moda Center.
Hmm.
Um, and, who knows why they put that in there, but the light was on in that loft. And I made a reply to that post that said something to the effect of like, well, Tom Dundon is now living there because he's an impoverished billionaire. He can't afford to renovate and do the things he wants to do for the team. He needs public money, right? I like to keep it fresh. I don't know if everyone understands my sense of humor on that site, but the real ones know. Uh, but I mean, sometimes you got to laugh to keep from crying, right? The whole subject matter has been like, I think, if you think about turning up the temperature on a pressure cooker, I think the public, for every week that goes by, for the public to learn more about city officials went to North Carolina
Yep.
with the folks who are on the other side of this transaction, and come back with a kind of commitment that they now understand how to deal in this transaction, or that the Oregonian posted a headline, which I don't think Shane really dug into the story, but daylighted that the planning meetings for this Trailblazers initiative started as far back as last August or sometime in the
Mm,
summer under a meeting invite called Project Mount Hood. And
Hmm.
previously, there was a similar type of recurring meeting called Project Orange under the Ted Wheeler administration that was about the MLB project. And so when you read that and you're like, look, there's a $600 million play here of public money
Hmm.
to a billionaire who, by the way, is a billionaire for ripping off poor people in the subprime market. Okay. And he's actively under litigation, I think, in the state of Oregon for that. And then we're going to funnel hundreds of millions of dollars to increase the value of an asset he just purchased. Meanwhile, we know that like senior officials in the city of Portland, not city councilors, but deputy city administrators, the mayor's chief of staff, some
Yep.
other actors are meeting behind closed doors to get to this point where we then rush the state legislature with this like commitment after commitment that we are unwavering, we are ready to go to throw as much money as we can muster at keeping the Blazers here. You start to sort of step back and be like, who's the city negotiating for here?
right.
Is the city negotiating for the city or the other side of the transaction? And that's how I feel about it. And I just started learning about the nature of this. This was all very closed doors during the short session. And I signed one letter that had sort of broad like commitments to the Trailblazers. Like, we love the Blazers. Great. Of course, I do. Yes. And then I was asked to sign another letter sort of committing again and more specifically about what the color of money is for this. And I was like, absolutely not. I'm not signing that letter because we have not, like, the mayor can offer his commitments in public or private all day long about having resources there for that, but he has to ask city council for that.
Right.
Right. And so the numbers are staggering. I think the reporting on this that I believe it was Alex Zelinsky at OPB did, but OPB did it. $406 million, I think, is the total 20-year package that the mayor has already committed to this before
And
negotiating. Before and,
and
and and then we don't know if there's actually a negotiator involved. We do know that there is like a sort of consultant that the city has hired, because there was a public records request, and there's some reporting today on this, by the way. There's a website called Rip City Not Rip Off, and the folks
oh right.
involved in that have been doing some great storytelling around this. They did a public records request, and then they found out that essentially the consultant that the city has hired for the Blazers thing that they're calling a negotiator is just like a sports economics development consultant and is shielded behind the attorney for the like it's working in for the city attorney. So there's a certain amount of like, nope, you don't get the scope of work of the contract, you don't get X, Y, and Z. And so I don't know if we have a negotiator with binding authority to actually negotiate for us. And I know that we've got senior officials who meet behind closed doors under code names, so you don't know what they're doing. And it's not clear who they're negotiating for. And so as I enter the fray here, I'm very clear that like not a dime, not a
Yeah.
dime of public money without voters understanding what they're getting. Because as you mentioned it earlier, when you kind of set this topic up, Kip, is that the sports economics literature, the peer-reviewed literature that you have to get double blind buy off from field scholars to get published in peer-reviewed journals, almost without exception, shows that when you put public money into stadium deals, you do not get a positive return on investment.
Right.
It does not create more jobs. It does not create more income than some other alternative because of the substitution effect.
It
Basically,
doesn't make a Ritz-Carlton viable all of a
no.
sudden. Yeah,
Yeah.
which I know that was one of the earlier arguments, right? Um,
And 9 times
I
out of 10, any renovations that have been done, the renovations do not favor somebody who's like, "Hey, I got a $50 ticket." They favor the skybox. They favor
That's
everyone
right.
else. They all of a sudden, there's a sushi bar as you're watching the Trailblazers. Not for me, but for
yeah,
whoever can afford it. So it's like, is this a public benefit in the end? No.
yeah,
Yeah. And
no,
I think, there's a list of reasonable demands. Like let's imagine this conversation went down very differently. Let's
Mhm.
say it was like, okay, well, we're thinking about doing this. Let's have some community engagement sessions. Let's have you rank your willingness to subsidize a deal like this, and if you did so, like, does your willingness change based upon what you know you're going to get in exchange? Like,
Mhm.
I could imagine the way we do budget listening sessions where it's like there's little dot exercises.
Mhm.
Um, would you like to see street level pricing? Like if you go inside the stadium,
right.
should you pay the same price for a beer and a hot dog? Not surprised I'm talking about hot dogs, I'm sure.
Mm.
Um, as you would outside.
Right.
I think I know what voters would say. Do you think that we should get a revenue share on this thing? Do you think that we should be able to realize payments in lieu of taxes, right? Do you think that the city should just give away real estate land as part of a thing? I think I know what they would say.
Yeah,
So based upon that style of engagement, you might end up with voters saying, you know what, yeah, I don't like my public dollars being spent on things that primarily benefit rich people, but I do like the Blazers. And so
Right.
as long as we've got X, Y, and Z, I would be comfortable with that. Like that would be a much different story, right?
Mhm.
City council would be armed with knowing precisely where their constituents stand and what their community wants out of their decisions on how to spend public money. But as far as I know, the only people who have been consulted on this are the people close to the deal and other state legislators and other kind of elected official or lobbyist groups. And so those are not representative of Portlanders.
no. I It should be a public referendum because we're talking about a massive amount of public land and resources. Same thing with the arguments for a baseball stadium and trying to get a baseball team here. Well, if you can't keep the Blazers here, how are you going to attract a baseball team, right? But it should be a public referendum. And I'm going to go off on a tangent like I almost never do. But it struck me very similar to, and Kat, you're gonna correct me on the actual name of this, or Mitch,
No,
you
I'm
can,
not.
but, the downtown restoration group, they did
Central
the
City Task Force.
yeah, thank you, Central City. Yeah, and just the first time they put it all together, they excluded almost anybody that had anything to do with equity or some of the challenges they have down there, or
Mhm.
livability, right? It was almost all
Mhm.
business. And they reconvened it and they did the exact same thing, saying that, well, we still have the same problems. And my first thought was, well, of course you still have the same problems because look who you invited the first time. Why did you reinvite them the second time? This isn't, first of all, it's closed door. Second of all, it's all business interests. Third of all, the public has no say in it, even though it is the public's city. It is the public's downtown. Doing things like this destroy public trust And to the point you made earlier, which I think is a critical one, when you guys enact legislation, waiting 5, 6 years for the city auditor to pick something up to see if something went well is not the way to do it. You need to have a review period saying, did what we, first of all, legislate and pass get implemented the way it was intended? Did it have the right effects? Didn't have the right effects, maybe we got it wrong and we need to tweak it. But what is the grading system? Is there even a grading system for all these contractors and the negotiator that they hired, right? And there isn't. The answer is there's not. So the fact that you're doing this transparency, accountability, pulling all the threads to open things up, I think is critical, and I really appreciate that about you. It's one of the things we talked about a year and a half ago, or however long that was, is that we need this as part of the process. I am curious in that vein, the new committee structure. It's only been around for a few weeks now. How is that playing out in your view?
Yeah, well, we only just had a first of our meetings in this new
Hmm.
system because there was a sort of hiatus. So on
How's it going?
well, actually, Thursday we had our committee of the whole meeting,
Yeah.
which I think went great. I think you know, Chair Samir Kanal, I think he's the best suited for holding a gavel like that. He's a parliamentarian through and through.
Hmm.
He's also very fair, and I think just understands how to lead a committee of the whole. And we considered two big issues. Again, it has deep oversight implications, not on the front end, but on the back end, because it's a proposal to raise a fee on Portlanders. It's
Hmm.
a proposal to raise a flat transportation utility fee to pay for largely road maintenance. And I think if you're going to do that, if you're going to raise a new fee by council action, not even by voter referendum, which we're allowed to do, but I mean, you better be damn sure that you know what you're doing, then uh, the way we talk about it and the way we introduce it and the way that we consider amendments to it and have that debate is super critical. And I think it went well yesterday. I think we didn't move the final action because we ran out of time. The chief carrier of it brought in a lot of different panels of people to talk about it. And that was like 2 hours. But you know what? It's really important to hear from people. And those were largely supporters, but we also heard from some people through just public testimony, and it won't be the last time, who absolutely detest that we're raising a fee, right? The other thing that took a while, but it was critical and important, was over the last week I had heard a pretty loud opposition from a space in the community that I view myself as a member of, sort of like an urbanist kind of active transportation policy wonk area. And they were like, this is a terrible proposal. This is a flat fee. It's regressive on the one hand, but
Hmm.
also it doesn't do anything to change our commitments to land use, which, as it's structured, is incentivizing and subsidizing sprawl. And I read that, I heard that proposal, and I sat with it. I said, you know
Hmm.
what, I think you guys are right. So I drafted something that I think captured what they were arguing for, and I
Hmm.
attached it to the agenda item in this committee, not to formally move an amendment, but to put it in the public record that I heard this from community. And I want to do something more than just have them give 2 minutes of public comment, which
Hmm.
then everyone just forgets and moves on, but rather to say, acknowledge you. I did this work in my office. I have now entered this back in the record in this kind of a way, and here's where I think we should go for it. That's the sort
Hmm.
of two-way, I think, interplay that these committees are supposed to be doing. And I think largely we have failed at that in our first year. I think some committees are better than others at it, but and I'll take ownership. I don't think the Arts and Economy Committee did a very good job of that at all, but others did. And so, that all being said, that creates a sort of procedural trick where that attachment and that conversation now stays with the item as it moves from committee into the full council. And so then
Hmm.
it's part of the legislative record, it's part of the legislative intent. And I did amend the ordinance to say this needs to be open to changes in rate design, not just adjustments in the rate, which,
Hmm.
you know, now creates the legitimacy and the permission structure to say, let's actually bring back that community driven proposal. Let's talk about it with some analysts. Let's talk about it in terms of some like trade-offs, because what I didn't want to
Mhm.
do was to take this idea I saw on the internet, even if I believe in it, and amend it directly into the code.
Right.
Because
Wholesale adopted. Yeah.
I mean, I might have been able to get the votes for that, but even if I could, I used to set rates for a decade before I worked in this job, and that's
Right.
the worst way to do a rate change. I mean, like you need to explain yourself to the public. So I think that's a really good example of how that committee should work. Because it's such of a matter of public importance and broad sweeping implications for the city, it needs to be all 12 of us to do that workshop kind of work. It can't just be 5 of us, and I hope that you trust me, because what'll happen is you don't trust your other committee
I
members, and then you,
saw a lot of that
yeah,
bickering. Well, I'm not on your council, so I don't know what you're doing.
Mhm.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
I that seemed like more often than not, if I'm gonna characterize it, a convenient excuse for not knowing what was going on.
yeah,
But I have been curious on how the committee of the whole is going to work. It's just such a weird phrasing as well. But, what no, anyway, I'm not even gonna go down that road.
Don't.
But yeah, thank you. But I appreciate hearing that. And for those that don't know, Counselor Canal has been doing the I can't the name was on the top of my head a moment ago when you were talking about it, but
Model UN.
Model UN, thank you, for years. And yeah, if you want a parliamentarian parliamentarianist in there, he's he's your person,
Yeah,
right? So I think that's awesome hearing that. Um, I the being able to as somebody who more more frequently than I think I ever expected, I've been uh, giving testimony both in committees and city council. And in the 30 years that I've been here, almost I've given that more in the last year than I have
Mhm.
in the previous 29 or whatever. But it is curious to think about that is how the people who do show up, who don't have a giant committee behind them, who have valid points, can how that information can get incorporated into things moving forward. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out in future committee meetings. Because I'd love to see that where in these larger committee meetings, you're like, that's a great point. Can we do a small work group on that to kind of investigate is this something we want to include as an amendment going forward? That'd be an amazing thing. Talk about making it worthwhile for people to come down and try to jam what they need to say into 2 to 3 minutes because
yeah.
it's a lot just to be there.
It is, and I think I saw some examples of that um, on display. To her credit, Loretta Smith used her committee that way quite often,
Mm,
and a little bit more free form, a little bit more conversational with the people at the on the other side of the dais. And there was one instance where I wouldn't say that they're powerless; they're part of a union, but um, it used to be the Western States Carpenters, but now it's the North Coast Carpenters Union. So they had levied some complaints about stolen wages and certain kind of abusive contracting practices. And the dialogue happened, but also it resulted in her and I think Councilor Canal from the committee going on a site visit, doing a walk with them.
mm.
And then after that walk and after that site visit, came back into committee and then talked about plans to flesh out an ordinance to address some of that. I thought that was great. I was like, wish I could have been on that site walk, but then you got a quorum problem at that point. But um, I really look forward to voting for that ordinance, or seeing that ordinance brought forward and seeing how I can help make it as best as it can be. Uh, that's one example. I mean, I think the drivers union folks who not traditional parts of the labor movement that are like have the big weight behind them,
Mhm.
but are like literally, I mean, independent contractors in their own cars who have formed a union. They've come into committee in the transportation, basically any committee that will have them, but they were at the Labor and Workforce Development Committee a lot. And based upon their active testimony and then the conversation that comes out of that and the little sort of workshopping that comes out of that, I've got another colleague who is talking about bringing forward some legislation to to cap the what we call the take rate. It's how much of the kind of ride that the Uber and Lyfts of the world take and
Mhm.
leave for the drivers at the end. And that's great. That's another good example of that kind of back and forth. To wit, I've already just received an email from the Metro Chamber opposing such a move, and it's going to be so disastrous for our entertainment economy because now it'll be more expensive to. I mean, the thing is that if I hail the cab, if I get on the app and I get the thing and it's my $100 surge pricing, I already hate that. I already hate that it's $100 to pick me up from the Moda Center. Um, I'd like to know though that my driver only got 18. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I think when these drivers do tell their passengers that, they're outraged.
yeah,
So, yeah, miss me with you're going to put our whole rideshare business out of business. Like I'm not sell that to the tourists. I'm not buying it.
Why don't we just reinvest back into public transit and screw all this?
Right. Or you can imagine a world where it's like, okay, fine. If Uber and Lyft can't tolerate a little bit of regulation and then leave our market, you already have a
Mhm.
bunch of drivers who know how to do it. It's not that hard to build an app to self-organize in this regard. So like I think that there's some of the most creative and hardworking people I've met. So yeah. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked with the conversation, but I would like the second year of these committees
yeah,
to be much more bi-directional in conversation.
yeah. Participatory democracy, what a concept.
There's a lot of interests that have to be balanced, and there's a lot of trade-offs, and as much as, like, I'll dunk on Portland Metro Chamber and some of the bigger businesses, they do operate here, so they do have to have a voice too. My problem has always been it seems like they have the loudest
An
voice,
outsized one, yeah.
and they wanna sometimes punish or tax or whatever you wanna call it, necessaries and not luxuries? So it's like, let's go after something I absolutely need, like groceries, but, um, let God forbid we tax, like, yeah, an Uber or a Lyft, and it's like, I actually need groceries.
Yeah.
I
I
could walk
mean,
my ass to Moda Center if I have to.
Right.
yeah, yesterday, or maybe it was Wednesday. What's time anymore? I don't know. I mean, the chambers so constantly, but we considered a tax relief measure by my colleague, Councilor Zimmerman, which I thought was a great move. I supported it. And it was a tax relief measure for like the smallest of the small businesses. It was like, you know, the exemption level beyond which you need to pay the business license profit tax is
Mhm.
50,000. It was set at 50,000 in 2007. It has not been adjusted since. And so
Wow.
it's just raising it to 75,000. So that'll provide some meaningful relief to some folks.
Mhm.
And but some of the testimony in support of it was like, we've got the highest taxes in the world. We have to solve our revenue problems, but not through taxes. And it's the kind of downtown interest folks. And the narrative is not true, but it's important to keep pushing that narrative because you want to convince that everyday Portlanders are in the same position as the people who pay the top marginal tax rates, who do
Right,
experience very high marginal tax rates by comparison. That's a low bar, by the way. I mean, this country doesn't tax rich people. Um,
right.
but um, but the average person, like if you're poor, I mean, if you're $25,000 a year or less, or you're $50,000 a year or less, you're paying some of the lowest. You have some of the lowest tax burdens in the country, in the city of Portland, in the state of Oregon. Um, and if you compare yourself to a city like Seattle, or even Vancouver, Washington, you're much better off than they are because they're paying a sales tax. They're paying regressive taxes, and the tax burden on the rich in those regimes is very light. And so, kind of downtown property interests, the sort of the people behind the Metro Chamber, so to speak, they're going to continue to push on those income taxes, and the gross receipts taxes, but really the income taxes because they don't want to pay it, and they would much rather
Mhm.
have a sales tax. They don't mind PSEF because they know that it doesn't really change much, and those prices don't really get passed on. But it's the preschool for all tax and it's the supportive housing services tax that they hate. They hate, and they want us to pay it instead of them, and they want us to pay it through a sales tax, and they want to convince Portlanders at the middle and the lower income end of the distribution that that's also in their best interest. And so we're going to continue to fight against that narrative.
No, no, thank you. Yeah, I mean, yeah, There's not much more to say there, right? Is that it just downtown won't revitalize when they keep demanding more money, but also won't lower any rent so that somebody can actually move in and open a damn store
Hmm.
or set up a small office, right? We still keep seeing more and more closed, yet we're in a death spiral. Well, whose fault is that? You're holding out for more money, this is what's going to happen. For folks that are listening, they may or may not be aware, but districts 3 and 4 are going to have an election again coming up. It's going to be ranked choice voting yet again. And guess what? It did not break the world. I would not expect we'll have 14,000 candidates again, which was a little bit daunting for folks. It wasn't 14,000, it's only about 12,000. But anyway, now that we've all survived ranked choice voting, because districts 3 and 4 have always been overrepresented by our previous commissioner form of government, you guys have 2-year terms.
Hmm.
So I would love to hear what you would like to accomplish in your next 4-year term coming up that you haven't had a chance to work on yet.
Yeah, thanks for asking me that question. And this is something I'm allowed to talk about as just an individual because my staff are not doing any of this. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I am running for reelection. I'm running for reelection because we got this 2-year term. We got some stuff started, but there are some big issues that not only I think are worth fighting for, but we can win. And I want to see them through. So the big one for me, I'll just list off a few, but social housing
Mhm.
is for me the kind of pillar policy achievement that if I do nothing else in this time in civic life, uh, then that I want to pass that. I want to get that over the line in this city, and I don't I don't care if it's by ordinance. I don't care if it's by referring something to the ballot and get convince folks to vote for it. Like whatever the best way that produces the best durable result is the one that I want. But that's what I want to pull off, and I know we can. We're in a moment where we can actually do this thing called social housing, which is really not to overcomplicate it, but it's very straightforward. It's this idea that the city helps acquire or build housing units where the rent is based on the cost of the building, and that's it. And then
Right.
that's what it is. And so it's not based upon the market. It's not based upon um, your different percentages of area median income. It's not based upon like how many bedrooms you are and like what income class you are. Forget it. It's just are you in this building? And if you are, you're paying a rent that's a function of the cost of this building. And then by the way, when the debt's paid off, the cost levels out or in some cases declines. That's what I want for us. I know we can get it. And we have serious tailwinds on it. Like the first thing I did I would say the second substantive thing I did at City Council when I got in here was I passed a resolution to put the Portland Housing Bureau on that track with
Yep.
Councilor Avalos, and extremely proud of that. And we hit the ground running. I think we did that inside of the first 100 days. And this fall, uh, right before election, we're going to get a report on how to pull that off. And so my
Nice.
intention is to follow that immediately with a policy action that directs the city to do exactly that. So that's what I'll be spending my time on between now and whatever time I have left in this term, but really to the fall is being ready for that report. Because what I
Mhm.
don't want to do is spend my time in office writing resolutions that generate reports that go nowhere. And social housing, the public is primed for it.
Yes.
I think if you try to poll voters on whether they want to spend more money on a bond and you poll test them on social housing that's in a very careful and complicated and technocratic way, like do you support publicly developed alternative housing models with mixed income characteristics, blah, 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 they're going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? No,
Right.
no. If you say, do you support the city stepping in, buying a building at a discount, and then setting the rent at the cost of the building and keeping it there? They're going to say yes. So,
And getting people housed. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I think that's what I want to achieve in a full 4-year term. If I'm reelected, I'm fighting every day for something like that. And not only that, but to keep it, to sort of make sure
Yes.
that we're building the scaffolding around it, so it can't just be washed away with the next administration or
Right.
dismissed when some other set of politicians don't like it. And that's where part of me is like, well, maybe it should be a ballot measure. Maybe really it should be something I refer out. But more work to do on that, and it could be phased in.
Yeah.
This housing ordinance that we're bringing forward, and I'm sure will pass next week, puts a sort of stake in the ground on it and says we want to capture $10 million for social housing. And so if we can do it right now and just start doing it by pilot, even ahead of a formal policy, then
Yeah.
you've already built some legitimacy around it, and then you can build some scaffolding around that too. So
Can I add
yeah,
to that? When we talked to you last on this podcast, we talked a little bit about Prosper Portland
yeah,
and their methodology of finding developers, selling them land for far below what it's generally worth. We can talk about the failed shoe initiative in Old Town and stuff like that. But the idea that the city is selling assets so that somebody else can go develop it and profit from it without solving our key problems. We talked about that previously being deeply problematic.
hmm
It's just a freaking no-brainer that the city should take its assets or buy property at the cheap, which they have access to, and develop it and manage it and get people off the streets and moved in, or folks that are rent burdened, move them into places that they can afford so that they can live and thrive. It's not rocket surgery at all.
absolutely. It's very straightforward. People, I think, understand that. There's a whole episode on Prosper we should do at some point, but I'll just note that I think what I've learned in my first year in office is if you want to do this, you don't rely upon that entity. Like, they're not accountable to city council.
Right.
Mhm.
They're only accountable to city of Portland through a very like a series of independent board changes and mayor bullying and that sort of thing. So that's a problem. I one of my most I think one of the biggest, most dramatic kind of learning moments for me in the budget last year was realizing that if you go toe to toe with Prosper over a small amount of money, you're going to get the full weight of their client list brought down upon you. And so you have to adapt to that strategy and say, okay, if we want to change Prosper or reform Prosper, you need to bring the full weight of your community organizing skills to the table.
Mhm.
And we have more work to do on that front. But I also think they know where I'm at too. So we're in an interesting place. But yeah, I think if you write an ordinance that says the city is explicitly and actively purchasing housing and holding it, right? And holding it as an asset, and then
Mhm.
we're governing the rent, and then at the same time we're making sure we have like high quality property management services. And also we're very responsive as a landlord. That's going to be good for tenants in the long run. And then you pair that ordinance with very strong language on tenant governance, and you're off to the races for social housing. And
Mhm.
so that way when we start talking about these tax increment financing districts that Prosper does, we can bring code changes. We can bring sort of strong policies that say, well, the housing money from these TIF districts should actually go to fund the development of new social housing. I mean,
Mhm.
that's all within the realm of possibility, but it takes time to do that work. It takes time to build coalitions to support you in that work, and that's what you need in a 4-year term. But I also believe very strongly in this principle that like you need to noticeably improve people's lives in
Mhm.
politics. You need to deliver things quickly and efficiently and then take credit for it. You need to say, I spent my time doing this. I fought for this. You're better off because of this. And trust me when I say I want to do some more of it. So I think
Mhm.
there's a certain amount of quick hit um, constituent service work, kind of ad hoc. Like I wasn't really planning for this, but I heard that there's a moment, an opportunity, and also the need to do something for my constituents and my community that you just need to jump on and do. That matters a lot. If I'm reelected, there's going to be more instances where, hey, there's a school that's at risk of closing because ICE is gassing them,
Yeah.
and they're dealing with a 9-month bureaucratic bottleneck at the city of Portland to like get a permit to change their school to a different location. I'm going to jump on that, and I'm going to
Mhm.
get that done in 2 weeks, which is what we did, and I'm very proud of that. That
Mhm.
school, I rode past the school this morning when they were doing crossing walk duty, and kids were happily going to school not being gassed. Getting a 4-way stop at an intersection near an elementary school, like basic stuff. It's big policy work. It's big transformational work. It's like being being out there and making sure that people don't get swept by the wayside in their complaints.
And I watch your socials and, the fact that you're out there constantly meeting with people, listening to them, interacting, going to events, or just having a town hall is phenomenal. It's just such a refreshing thing to see. So I really appreciate you embracing that you are first and foremost most a representative to your constituents and make yourself accessible to them. That's just a great thing to see. What else do you see on the horizon that you're hopeful for along with your next 4 years in city council and, your fellow councilors? That's the word. It's been a long day already.
Fridays are hard.
I know, I know. I'm looking forward to I have a town hall this evening too, so my day's only getting started. But yeah, I've got a whole list of like land use and code change and planning commission style stuff that I want to tackle. Probably the most imminent, and it's work that starts in my office in this term, but it would conclude if I got reelected, is intervening directly in how the city is showing up on the critical energy infrastructure task force work. As you know, we've got this very unstable pile of sand upon which a bunch of tanks holding volatile chemicals sit.
Yep.
And we're one earthquake or one wildfire away from like a, a historic ecological disaster. What we're seeing in draft from the Bureau of Planning Sustainability is a very weak proposal that doesn't really have meaningful drawdown requirements because, again, the pressure from the Port of Portland, the pressure from
Right.
the lobbyists who don't want to lose they don't want to change the status quo, basically.
Right.
So I'll be fighting this summer to make sure that we adopt a plan that has meaningful and timely drawdown requirements, and then works closely with the state to make sure in the next long session we've identified an alternative location for where we store our energy resources. I mean, we're not going to flip the switch tomorrow and not need petroleum products, although we better figure that out very soon because we have an energy crisis on our hands with this Iran quagmire that has begun
Hmm.
needlessly. But that's in the weeds, Title 33, deep land use code stuff that is painfully complicated. I want to tackle that and make sure that we're not rubber stamping something that's bad that then is very difficult to change. Like let's do it right the first time, and I think that that's doable if I can shepherd that forward. And then the other piece is I think the city needs to move faster on a lot of its zoning and land use considerations to be able to build more housing. I would describe myself as a left YIMBYist. Not all YIMBYs are the same. I'm not a NIMBY though. I think that we need to build, and I think that we need to be pretty smart about how we do it, and have strong anti-displacement commitments, of course. But um,
Mhm.
one idea that I've got is like we really should bring forward a package that hires an architect to sort of do a one-time set of plans that are all there's a whole book of pre-approved plans that you can just choose from, and you have a self-certification permitting process, and like you could be off to the races building a house in a week. Those are like focused initiatives that you can do that pay dividends over a long period of time. So I just kind of want to work on that sort of urbanist dirty work for a few years, while also doing all the good oversight and accountability stuff. And then finally, we need to do more for renters, despite what the lobbyists will have you believe. I had this conversation with someone I think from one of the multifamily interest groups. It told me at an event, just was like, "Don't you think we've done enough for renters?" I was like, what are you
Yeah.
talking about? Like half of the renters in this city are rent burdened. Half. And that's half. I mean, that's a quarter of the population, right? That's
Mhm.
ridiculous. So obviously we need to do more. So one thing I'm interested in is like lowering the relocation threshold to like 5%.
Hmm.
So it becomes a meaningful check on the state's really, I think, lax rental cap.
Mhm.
Um, I think that we need, and need to abolish pet rent. I think we need to do something
Please.
about these onerous fees that are charged when you just apply for an apartment. And then finally, I mean, there's a whole renters bill of rights pledge that I have signed on to that I want to fight tooth and nail to get every bit out of it that we can. But that's hard work that takes years.
I'd like
Oh,
to know why my water, sewage, and trash is $130 a month.
Yeah. Um, yeah, exactly. We need to have oversight hearings on that as well. I mean, those are our private haulers, and we've got a lot of work to do on just rates in general. If you've been following along with the water bill conversation, the Bull Run thing, that's a sticky wicket right there. We've recently learned that there was no follow through or commitment on establishing the required Bull Run oversight committee. That's a serious fumble, right? And so, what are we going to do about that? I see the work of a full term to sort of say, look, here's a couple, two, three big policy achievements. We're going to focus on that, but in the liminal space between them, we're working through our committees to have oversight on these day to day affordability issues for sure.
no, I appreciate that so much, and the wonkiness that you bring to your office, as well as the ability to get out there and connect with your constituents, is this rare combination as far as my experience with counselors is like there are some really, really bright people on city council out there, but you have a level of depth and understanding that, again, when we talked last and I didn't know a lot about you. I'm like, this dude's awesome. And I really appreciate that. And the rent thing, I've been a renter all 28 some odd years. I think I've been in Portland, and it I make a decent living when I'm employed, and I've been laid off a few times in the last few years, and my landlord is reasonable. My rent went up $50 this year, right? And went up $50 last year. But between that and the pet rent and the fact that market rate is pretty exorbitant to begin with, I'm still rent burdened, right? It's still hard for me to make all my ends meet. So being creative and figuring out ways just to start pulling back some of that, it's going to be so meaningful for tens of thousands of people in this city. So really, really appreciate that. Before we go, anything else we hadn't touched on that we should?
Hot dogs.
Oh,
Hot
yeah.
dogs.
I post a
All right.
lot about hot dogs. Just it started as a bit,
I know.
but then I was like, is this who I am? Like, and so like been eating a lot of hot dogs. I I like the idea of being able to walk in a city, walk in a park, go to the waterfront park, or like you're down near Pioneer Square or whatever,
Mhm.
or you're at somewhere any of the neighborhoods in Portland. And if you've got a sidewalk that's wide enough to accommodate such a thing, I think you really need to enable someone to have a small cart that they can
Mhm.
sell hot dogs out of, or falafel, or shawarma, or something. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's just like an elephant ear. I don't care. But the idea is like you should be able to get access to street food without going out and seeking it. Like we have a great food cart pod scene, and that's great, and there's no replacing that. But what we don't have is just like I'm walking along, oh, and there's a guy with like, sure, it's a hot dog. Yeah, you know what? I haven't had one in a couple hours. I think I want one now. Um, I I'm just kidding. I don't eat hot dogs all day long. I would have terrible gout issues if I did. But I did participate in the Portland Hot Dog Week, and I think
Uh-huh.
I got like 4 or 5 booked dogs under my belt on the public records. You know, next year I'll have more. If I get reelected, you can be sure I'll have more. But Kat, like the thing I'm working on specifically on a policy level is I've got an ordinance. I introduced it to the Arts and Economic Committee. Basically, realized there was no future to get that out of that committee at that time
Mhm.
because of the composition and because of the sort of deep opposition I had from people who do not support free enterprise. Ironically. And so I referred it back to my office. I'm doing a little work on it. I need some work anyway, and I'm going to bring it back this June in the housing committee. And it's going to take away the primary barriers for one to legally operate those cars. Now,
Good.
if you've gone to a Blazers game or you've gone to like the Schnitz or somewhere like that, you may have been able to buy a hot dog from a cart, but those carts are not permitted. Those are not legal carts. I think it's great that they're able to operate, and I want to find a pathway for someone who is in that business right now to get permitted so they don't have to worry about dealing with getting shut down and, or worse. And so I I think it's great. I think street food is like part of a vibrant urban culture. Um, and I'm a poster at heart, and so I'm like kind of a shit poster. And so I did title the ordinance to promote free enterprise. The only counselor who's ever cared about free enterprise or filed an ordinance to promote free enterprise is the socialist economist.
I think it's a great idea. So thank you for championing free enterprise in our hyper capitalist system, Councilor Green.
You're welcome. I used to have like a Ludwig von Mises quote at the ready for something like this, but I don't. To really lean into the bit, but I've
I
lost
know.
my touch.
That's
What
all right. You've got a lot going on.
What's very funny, before we wrap up, is when folks who don't agree with your policies try to mock them or try to distill it into something very simple. Of course, then it just becomes, oh, Mitch Green just has hot dogs. Look at his hot dog crawl card. This is all he gives a shit about. And it's like, no. At the core of this is allowing folks who've been disenfranchised to actually have a business. It's allowing folks to stabilize their living situation so that they don't have to move out of the city or end up 6 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, whatever you
Yeah.
have going on. Like, they don't understand that this is actually a bigger deal than it is. And they make it about a hot dog, kind of like how they tried to, mock Mike Schmidt, and they had the Schmidt show, which actually worked in his favor.
Yeah.
Like, they don't understand that every time they make fun of you, it actually really works for you.
Yeah. I liken it to, like, that's reply guy behavior. Like that's what you expect for someone to get in your comments and be like, yeah, but actually, like
Yep.
it's not funny. You lost a plot, and also you've missed this really important substantive thing. Like the thing with the foie gras ban ordinance. There is a certain segment of the population in the city that is like absolutely hates me because of that, and then also because of the hot dogs, because they think that's the only thing I've done or the only thing I care about. And it's like, I've actually passed through council some of the highest legislative achievement counts right now in council. And that's stuff I've been able to do on the side for people who've been asking for that. Like the sort of animal rights crew in this town has been very active on this front for a really long time. And they just like, they have a voice too. They matter. So it's not like distracted work. It's like, okay, we're prioritizing our work in a way that's like meets the moment. We're doing a lot at once. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't suffer haters.
Right on. Oh, absolutely.
All right. So as we wrap up, where can people find out how your campaign's going? Where can they donate? How can they keep up on all the things you're doing, including if you found a really cool new hot dog joint?
Yeah, so my website is Portland.com. The website's under active refresh to kind of like pivot from 2024 to 2026, but it has the elements that you need, which is my current list of endorsements, early endorsements, and as well as a link to donate. I am participating in the small donor election program. I think I was the fastest to hit tier 1 donors by like the days in the game. I just like 2 days behind Olivia Clark, but she filed months before me. And so I've got I'm like doing quite well on the fundraising end, but I'm now on the march to the tier 2, which is needing 750 unique donors. So the best way to support my campaign at this point is to do 2 things. One, sign up for my newsletter, and then making a donation of between $5 and $25 to my campaign, which will get me closer to that public match.
Fantastic.
And then I think we're going to probably do a proper campaign launch in the summer, and I'm almost certain there'll be hot dogs there.
Fantastic. We'll send our on the street reporter Kat Mahoney out, or I'm sorry, Aquafina out to be covering that. Thank you so much for joining us, Mitch. Really appreciate it.
I've really had a great chat with you guys. Thanks for having me back on, and I'm glad to see you as part of this crew too, Kat.
Thanks.
Aquafina.
Aquafina, yeah, she's just difficult. That's all.
I'm going to do it every interview. I'm just going to name a different Asian because I told Kip that apparently I am every fucking Asian. We all look alike. I've been told this. It's like, fine, fuck it. Here we go.
Yeah. So here we are. Yeah, it's a slightly different vibe from the previous version. We'll be cutting this part out.
Progress Portland is also on Facebook and Instagram, and we have event listings and updates on our website, progressportland.org. There's a content form on our website if you'd like to help out or have questions or comments. Our theme music is by the Portland band Helvetia.